The International Atomic Energy Agency revealed over the weekend that Iran possesses enriched uranium in quantities sufficient for about 10 nuclear bombs. This prompted a highly unusual statement by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm Yair Pinto, reporting on everything that you need to know about Israel. So in a report issued over the weekend by the International Atomic Energy Agency, it stated that Iran has increased the amount of enriched uranium that is held by the Islamic Republic to very close to 90% of what is needed to produce nuclear weapons, and that it also had in the past conducted secret nuclear activities using undeclared materials. So Iran has responded by furiously demanding an explanation from Austria, which is the country whose intelligence agencies apparently pulled all this together and brought it to the attention of the International Atomic Energy Agency. A regime statement insists that its enrichment program is intended for peaceful purposes only under full agency supervision. The Prime Minister of Israel responded with a highly unusual statement on Saturday, saying in part that the program has no civilian justification. This level of enrichment exists only in countries seeking to create nuclear weapons. The international community must act immediately to stop it. However, Israel is certainly not waiting for that to happen, but is taking concrete steps to ensure that it can act on its own if it has to dramatically improve its readiness to strike Iran's nuclear facilities. So according to reports, this readiness is expressed through Air Force drills, long-range strikes, and operational capability tests. However, Israeli officials have constantly said that all of this is simply prudent and its preparations for any possible scenario, and Israel very much prefers to have the United States on its side. TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will bring us his take on this unprecedented sequence of events and tell us what he expects will happen next. And meanwhile, the IDF has targeted the remnants of Hamas's military leadership and increased firepower in northern Gaza, understanding that the collapse of the leadership there would create a domino effect across the Gaza Strip. However, there are concerns that Israel might not be prepared for a rapid collapse of Hamas and the even greater instability that could result from this in the Gaza Strip. For now, IDF forces continue operating at a high tempo, demolishing tunnels, eliminating terrorists, and capturing weapons and ammunitions. Additionally, the IDF is increasing efforts to move the population from the northern part of Gaza towards shelters in the south, and the coordinator of government activities in Israel in the territories is expected to approve the opening of another humanitarian aid center. And speaking of humanitarian aid, this week, 579 trucks entered the Gaza Strip via the Kerem Shalom crossing, and there were reports that Gazans looted flour sacks from many aid trucks in Khan Yunis. However, despite the delays and the looting and all the other problems, the American company responsible for aid distribution said that more than 3.8 million meals were distributed in the last 5 days. And on the diplomatic front, Hamas sent a vague response regarding the new Witkoff framework, which Israel sees as a refusal. By that I mean that Hamas promised a response by Saturday to the latest proposal by United States Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. The response they gave was not a definite no, but it was also a signal that they're not willing to say yes unless Israel agrees to a bunch of conditions that everybody knows is impossible for us to agree to. Hamas claimed that the Witkoff proposals seeks to achieve a permanent ceasefire and includes the release of 10 living hostages and the remains of 18 others who have died in captivity in exchange for the release of Palestinian security prisoners that are held in Israeli jails. An Israeli source said this is a new proposal that has nothing to do with what Hamas says that they're agreeing to. An American official seems to agree, saying that Hamas's response should not be seen as an official positive reply and that discussions on the matter will continue. In a more general sense, the United States has given an ultimatum to Hamas demanding that they accept the framework or Israel will continue to act as it wishes. And meanwhile, a senior Hamas member claims that the reason that they're not releasing the remaining hostages is because it's all they've got left and they don't want to end up like the terrorist organization Hezbollah. Elsewhere, IDF Arabic spokesman Avichai Aderi revealed the luxury hotels where Hamas leaders live in. In a social media post, he told Gazan residents that Hamas leadership is selling you out cheap. Instead of focusing on citizen welfare, the leadership is abandoning its people. However, not all of Hamas's leadership are residing in luxury hotels. We have some new details for you about the brilliant operation by the IDF and the Shin Bet 3 weeks ago, in which Mohammad Sinwar and 2 Hamas battalion commanders were eliminated. And speaking of eliminated terrorists, a Hezbollah field commander was eliminated over the weekend in an airstrike on a village almost 40 kilometers north of Israel's border. This evil man was named Mohammad Ali Jamoul, and he commanded the rocket and missile array of the Shaqif sector, but he won't be doing that any longer. However, despite all the losses that they've sustained, Hezbollah just keeps trying to rebuild their capability to attack Israel. We'll have to keep a close eye on them and keep hitting them whenever we can. And speaking of hitting threats, the Israeli Air Force was compelled to hit a cargo of anti-ship missiles at the Syrian port of Latakia over the weekend. The IDF said that these were game-changing munitions that could not be tolerated as they posed a threat to Israel and the international maritime traffic. This comes even as Syrian interim president Abu Muhammed al-Jolani spoke with an American delegation led by businessman Jonathan Bass over this weekend. His words were published in the Jewish Journal, including a comment that we have common enemies. We can cooperate. He added, however, that you can't conduct real negotiations when the skies are full of fear. And on another note, American sources estimated a conversation with the El Arabiya news portal that Iran continues to smuggle weapons to the Houthi terrorist organization and can rebuild their capacity to pose a threat to the maritime freedom within a few months, even though about 80% of their capabilities have been destroyed. So, we have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what's happening in Israel on day 604 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are acting under the directives of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. So a moment before we begin, I want to tell you that here at TBN Israel, we work day and night to bring you the truth and the news about what's happening in Israel. We ask you to help us by hitting that subscribe button on YouTube and following us on social media. But if you want to do more, if you want to help us create more videos like this one, please visit tbnisrael.com/give and donate to our efforts. Every dollar you donate will be invested in creating more videos like this one. And speaking of the truth, let's get started with today's report by talking about the latest updates coming out of the Gaza Strip. Even over this weekend, IDF forces under the Southern Command continue to act guided by the Intelligence Directorate and the Shin Bet against the terrorist organizations throughout the Gaza Strip within the framework of Operation Gideon's Chariots. The forces eliminated terrorists and destroyed weapons, terror infrastructures, and underground terror facilities, just as they have been doing for over a year now. But military sources said on Saturday evening that in the coming days, the IDF will increase its military pressure in the Gaza Strip with an emphasis on the northern part of Gaza, aimed at moving the population from the north towards the shelter areas in the south. At the same time, the sources said that the coordinator of government activities in the territories is expected to approve the opening of another humanitarian aid center to expand the food distribution system to the residents in the Gaza Strip. Alongside the military pressure, the IDF is also applying pressure on the civilian population so that it will undermine Hamas's rule from within. This is all part of a plan that Israel prepared for a very long time. The goal of Operation Gideon's Chariots is to pressure Hamas to release the hostages, and there are many levers of pressure that are being applied in different areas all at the same time. This campaign is being run according to a graded pressure policy with limited ground maneuver and heavy fire from the Air Force, Navy, and artillery, all to prevent casualties to our forces. And meanwhile, large numbers of Gazan residents met the roughly 110 trucks loaded with flour that arrived on Saturday morning in Khan Yunis under the banner of the World Food Programme. The flour was meant to be distributed in an orderly fashion this week, but the crowds didn't seem to have patience for that. On the subject of looting humanitarian aid shipments, a senior Hamas member told the terrorist organization's El-Rassal Hamidia network over the weekend that in the coming days we will execute thieves and collaborators involved in theft, murder, and spreading chaos, beyond whom sent Israeli intelligence and foreign spy agencies. The same senior official who spoke with El-Rassalcha added that after national and leadership consultations today, the terror organization will submit a response document to the new ceasefire proposal delivered by President Witkoff's special envoy Steve Witkoff. And meanwhile, at the United Nations, they say that the current situation in the Gaza Strip is still the worst since the war began. However, the United Nations also refuses to work with the American Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF, claiming it is not neutral and that its distribution model forces the displacement of Palestinians in accordance with Israel's IDF demands. Israel's United Nations ambassador Danny Danon said that Israel would, at least for now, also allow aid shipments by the old route via trucks, even though Hamas and looters seize most of them. The foundation, for its part, says it has already distributed more than 2.1 million meals. And in a related story, after rocket launches towards Israeli communities carried out by Hamas over the weekend, the IDF Arabic language spokesman Colonel Avichai Aderi warned residents of the Khan Yunis area from which the rockets were fired, saying that terror organizations continue to use your surroundings to fire rockets at Israel. The IDF will strike forcefully any area from which terror is carried out. The area has been warned many times in the past and declared a dangerous combat zone. Responsibility for the evacuation and for the civilian suffering lies with the terrorist organizations, foremost Hamas. You must evacuate immediately westward to the El Mawasi area. The terror organizations have brought disaster upon you. Evacuate immediately for your safety. Colonel Aderi posted another video message on Saturday evening directly addressing Hamas leaders a week before the Eid al-Adha festival and asking them, "Where are you, Hamas leadership? Sleeping? Where are you? Usma Hamdan, hungry? Certainly not. Where are you, Sami Abu Zuhari? Sleeping on silk in Algeria and saying that everything destroyed in Gaza can be compensated? Where are you, Khalil El-Khaya? The leaders really live pleasantly. Where are you, Hamas leadership? In hotel? Have you really reached such a level of indifference towards the Gaza residents? Eid al-Adha is approaching. Fear Allah." Building in this, Kogat Chief Major General Ghassan Elian addressed Gaza residents via the Arabic Facebook page El Munsik, following sharp criticism posted by a Strip residents against Hamas leadership. Gaza residents, Hamas's leadership is selling your citizens cheaply. This is the same leadership that misled you. Instead of focusing on caring for citizens, this same leadership left its citizens behind while its senior leaders abroad indulge in luxury hotels, planes, and restaurants. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every military development, boots on the ground style. But before we move on to the diplomatic developments and to the latest news about Iran's quest for nuclear weapons, I would like to invite you to click on the subscribe button so that you remain tuned to the truth in real time. As I said in the introduction, Hamas has once again declared that it agrees to the proposal made by the United States Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, but in reality, they are simply making their own proposals and falsely comparing them to the Witkoff plan. Israel is not falling for this deceit, as an Israeli official responded to Hamas's announcement saying that the terrorist organization in practice rejected the latest Witkoff framework and presented a new proposal with its own conditions. Witkoff himself seems to agree with this assessment, saying that the response by Hamas, which included several amendments to what he'd proposed as well as the new demands, is totally unacceptable and only takes us backwards. Senior Hamas official Bassem Naim told the Reuters news agency that Witkoff was being unfair and showing complete bias towards Israel. And earlier, Saudi media had already reported that Hamas was expected only to agree in principle to the new framework, but to set conditions and reservations together with that agreement. In Israel, the conditions set by Hamas are not considered agreement, since the requirement is to accept the framework as it is, and insofar as Hamas adds conditions, at the very least further negotiations is expected to be conducted about these additional conditions. So the Saudi Al-Hada channel even claimed earlier that other Palestinian factions in the Gaza Strip told Hamas that it must accept the framework of Witkoff, which constitutes an opportunity to stop the war. Even though it is not ideal, it would serve the purpose of ending the displacement and the hunger that so many are suffering from. To briefly review, the updated Witkoff framework essentially includes the release of 10 living hostages and the remains of 18 others who have died in captivity. They would be released in 2 batches within 1 week, half on the first day and half on the 7th day, and in parallel, it stipulates a 60-day ceasefire during which negotiations on ending the war will be held. This is alongside the release of 125 security prisoners serving life sentences inside Israeli jails, 1,111 terrorists who surrendered or were taken prisoners during the fighting inside the Gaza Strip, and other concessions. So guys, I invite you to leave a comment on this video telling us what do you think about this or about anything else that we talked about today in this report. Do you think this is a good deal that Israel should accept? I think it's 10 for 1,200 prisoners, which were terrorists basically. Personally, I think that Hamas is getting a very generous offer, considering that they've been utterly defeated on the battlefield and have lost all of their regional allies in this war that they started. I don't know why we're even still talking about releasing Palestinian security prisoners in exchange for their releasing hostages. Furthermore, their insistence on continuing to fight this war, which they've already lost, is causing the ordinary Gazan people, whom they claim to care so much about, to suffer terribly. If the leaders of Western countries who claim to care so much about these people really wanted this war to end, they could do the obvious and tell Hamas it's time to surrender, instead of trying to force Israel to stop fighting while Hamas still holds our hostages and remains in power of the Gaza Strip. But please, tell me what you think about all of this in the comment sections. I really want to know. Now, moving on, we'll talk a little bit more about how Hamas is throwing a wrench into these negotiations. Hamas inserted into its reply a demand for a comprehensive withdrawal of forces that does not appear in the framework that Israel approved, as well as full humanitarian aid delivery under the distribution centers secured by an American company and located in areas controlled by the IDF. I guess they don't like to lose the lever of control that they have over the population that food distribution is giving them. In addition, as noted, Hamas demands to spread the release of the hostages into batches over the entire 60 days of the ceasefire and not within 1 week, something that Israel is likely to oppose. The impression in Israel is that the new Witkoff framework was a final compromise offer not the start of another negotiations, but apparently Hamas didn't have that same impression. So in any case, after the response was passed to the mediators, sources says that contacts are being held with Witkoff's team in an attempt to insert some changes or phrase them as an annex to the agreement. But further discussions are set to continue, but Witkoff's patience with the process is reportedly running out. One possible reason is that he's also busy with other negotiations with Russia and with Iran and would like to get an agreement to end the war in the Gaza Strip wrapped up so he can concentrate on these developments. And on that note, over the weekend, an Arab diplomatic source involved in the negotiations said that Hamas's situation is clearly worsening. This is because, among other things, there are now calls coming out of part of the leadership inside the Gaza Strip reporting difficulties in command and control of fighting units, supply problems, and salary cuts. And simultaneously, internal protests are going on, and most of the civilian systems that Hamas manages are not functioning. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on all the truth of everything that you need to know about what's happening in Israel in this war against the Gaza Strip, against Hamas. And as always, we ask you to keep spreading the truth, share, and help us any way you can by subscribing to this YouTube channel, by telling a friend about what's happening in Israel, or by visiting tbnisrael.com/give and donating any kind of amount so we can create more videos like this one. Now, there's one more story to report about in the Gaza Strip, and it came on Saturday evening when the IDF spokesperson's unit confirmed that Hamas's military wing chief Mohammad Sinwar and Rafah brigade commander Mohammad Sabbath were eliminated in a targeted strike in Khan Yunis about 3 weeks ago. This is effectively the army's first confirmation of this elimination after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz had already confirmed Sinwar's elimination a few days ago. These evil men were terminated while staying in an underground command and control compound beneath the European hospital in Khan Yunis, endangering the civilian population in the hospital and its surroundings. According to the IDF statement, the strike was carried out by the Southern Command and the Israeli Air Force with precise intelligence directed from Amman and the Shin Bet, involving complex decisions that were taken in real time by the Chief of Staff and the Shin Bet. So in recent months, the Israeli Air Force developed a method of eliminating senior figures hiding in underground bunkers. It is designed to be put into motion quickly when actionable intelligence is received about the location of high-value targets. This particular elimination operation was very complex as it was conducted adjacent to the European hospital in Gaza. The Israeli Air Force struck with more than 50 precision munitions in less than half a minute the underground route where Mohammad Sinwar and other terrorists were eliminated, without impairing the hospital's functioning. So guys, once again here at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you the truth about what's happening in this region, and as always, we want to invite you to pray for the situation and to help us share it with more people around the world. You can do that by clicking the subscribe button or sharing us on social media. And guys, speaking of the truth, our next story is about an important revelation by the International Atomic Energy Agency that is investigating Iran's enrichment of uranium to a level that potentially can create and be used to create nuclear weapons that will be used against Iran's enemies, which are Israel and the United States. We turn to TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani, who will take us through everything behind this leaked knowledge and Iran's quick response. So, over to you, Mati.
This has been a highly unusual weekend. And let me explain. The IAEA, the International Agency for Atomic Energy, comes out with a report over the weekend, and in it, it lets us know that the Iranians have possibly a sufficient amount of enriched uranium to create 10 bombs. Not only that, they're enriching uranium at a rate that is sufficient to create an additional bomb every month of the calendar year. That's 12 additional bombs per year. And this is a cause for incredible concern, both for the international community and especially for the state of Israel. And so much so that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu comes out over the weekend, which is something very uncustomary in Israel, and releases a very strong press statement talking about what Israel must do and how the Iranians need to have that ability removed. Now let me walk you through the numbers. The Iranians reportedly, and this is a report that comes out through multiple agencies that collect this information, but specifically the Austrians. But again, this is an international agency that aggregates information about the Iranians. And they let us know that the Iranians have almost 9.2 tons of enriched uranium, and out of which they've created about 10% of that only in the last 30-day period. And that's where there's cause for substantial concern. If we thought the Iranians were pushing for an agreement, and if we thought the Iranians were thinking of changing their mindset, which is, by the way, not something I think any of us were actually believing, if we believe that, it shows us that they're on the exact opposite route, considering the atomic bomb option. So Prime Minister Netanyahu says the following thing. He says, no one who is not pursuing an atomic bomb creates and stockpiles this amount of enriched uranium. And this whole situation shows you multiple things. One, it shows you that the Iranians are serious when they say they're pushing to a bomb. Two, when you hear their press releases, and they come out on a weekly basis after every series of meetings with the American group talking about their bomb and the sanctions being removed from them. Every single weekend they release a press statement that says very clearly to the world, we will not stop enriching uranium and we will never give up our stockpiles of enriched uranium. And they've done exactly that. And this is bad news for Israel. When we look at a country of the size and the military capability of the Iranians, putting that much money and that much effort into stockpiling enriched uranium at a level that is almost sufficient for creating multiple bombs, we know they mean business. And this puts the entire conversation over an agreement and a negotiation in jeopardy completely. And from Israel's perspective, all alarm bells are going off as they exactly should be. So let me break down what's been happening. One, for many years now, the Iranians have been pushing for a bomb. And the way they've been doing that is they've been enriching uranium on a daily basis. What does that look like? They've built multiple centrifuge facilities. These are facilities that enrich uranium from a grade that is insufficient for creating electricity or bombs, and slowly enriches it to the level where it would be what we would call military grade enriched uranium. And at that point, they can start pushing towards a warhead and then a delivery mechanism. At the same time, they've been pushing on those routes too. They've been working on the delivery mechanism. They have intercontinental ballistic missiles. They have ballistic missiles that they've used multiple times throughout this war. So the Iranians have been pushing these three parts of a nuclear capability. They've been enriching uranium on multiple sites to make it very, very hard for anyone in the international community from stopping them from enriching uranium. They've been working on the warhead side of things at a lesser degree, and they've been working really hard at the delivery mechanism. And what we found out is that as these negotiations are ongoing between the US, the Iranians through multiple intermediaries, the Iranians have been pushing full speed ahead in enriching uranium. In fact, it seems they've enriched their entire stockpile in 10% in just 1 month. And that rate is alarming because that rate lets us know, one, that they mean business, which I think we knew previously too. Two, that they don't really believe that an agreement is going to happen. Why would you spend so much money and time and resources if you thought an agreement was coming down the pipeline? Now let's talk about the diplomatic side of this. Now that we know the facts, we know the Iranians have a stockpile, we know they've been enriching, we know that Israel is incredibly alarmed and threatening military action almost immediately. We know that our Prime Minister spoke about this over the weekend, again, showing how extreme this is. The US comes out, and the US says some very strong words, as usual. This has sort of been the ongoing business and ongoing relationship between the US and the Iranians. And the US says to the Iranians, look, we have a deadline here, and you have to stop enriching uranium. Not only that, just a couple months ahead, there's an automatic snapback mechanism that imposes all the sanctions that previously existed on the Iranians. And Iran is afraid of that. Now the issue is Iran knows this is coming, and they've said clearly, look, if you go back to the automatic snapback mechanism, or you try to prevent us from enriching uranium, we're going to take extreme measures. And now they've started using also the word nuclear in that response, just to show you how weaponized their conversation has become and how violent their rhetoric is against other countries. And all this is happening after a month and a half of direct negotiations between the US and the Iranians that have been in the nitty-gritties of the details. What level of enriched uranium, how much uranium they can keep, if at all, can they maintain centrifuge facilities, etc., etc. So all of this is happening while the backdrop is them supposed to be negotiating no more enriching uranium, no more stockpiling uranium. So all in all, really bad news, especially for the people of Israel. What we fear here in Israel is a weak, a toothless agreement with the Iranians, between the US and the Iranians, that says we will remove their nuclear capabilities, but not truly remove them. We will stop them from enriching uranium, but not truly stop them from enriching uranium. And this last show of force that's been exposed by the International Atomic Agency shows exactly what the Iranians have been up to. Enriching uranium, stockpiling enriched uranium, pushing towards a bomb, using rhetoric that becomes far more and more violent, more and more explosive, pun intended, against Israel and against the West, all in a push for a bomb, all while buying time as they negotiate with the US. And that leaves us with a very clear option here. An agreement doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Unless something incredibly surprising happens in the next couple of weeks, the latest report that came out over this weekend shows us clearly what the Iranians are trying to do, which is push for a bomb. And they're doing so while stalling and prolonging a negotiation that they have no intention of carrying out. And Israel, well, Israel knows what it needs to do. Israel has said clearly and trained for this and let the world know that we can't live with an Iranian nuclear option. Iran can't have a nuclear bomb. They can't be even a threshold to a nuclear bomb. And we must take action against that. And I think that leaves us with, more than a practical note, a need to pray about this, because our leaders need wisdom, both our Prime Minister and our Minister of Defense, and also the US President Donald Trump needs wisdom in this situation, because we're dealing here with a type of evil that is diabolical, that is corrupting, that is intentionally trying to bring this region into a full-on nuclear war. And that must be stopped. That is the reality of the relationship with the Iranians. That is the reality of their actions, and it's needed for the world to understand exactly where they're going. Make sure you keep praying for what happens in Israel. Make sure you stay on top of the news as they come out of the Middle East. And now, back to Yair Pinto.
So thank you very much, Mati Shoshani, for all the analysis. As usual, you have brought some order into this chaos. And you guys at home, if you like what you see and hear in these videos, I would like to invite you to keep spreading the truth and consider investing in what we're doing here so that we can create more videos like this one. We need your help. We need your help also financially. So if you want to support our work, visit tbnisrael.com/give and make a donation today. Every dollar will be invested in creating more videos just like this one. So thank you so much. Now, we're moving on to Israel's northern arena. And on Saturday morning, the IDF eliminated Mohammad Ali Jamoul, a Hezbollah member who commanded the organization's rockets and missile array in the Shaqif sector. So the elimination took place near the Sunni village of Deir el-Zarkhani in southern Lebanon, which is about 40 kilometers from Israel's northern border. An IDF statement on this incident said that during the war, Jamoul promoted numerous firing plans towards Israel's heartland and IDF forces, and recently worked to rebuild Hezbollah's terror infrastructure in that area. His activity constituted a blatant violation of the understandings between Israel and Lebanon on the ceasefire, and the IDF will continue to act to remove any threat to the state of Israel. This was only one blow that Israel struck against the Hezbollah terrorist organization over the weekend. And on Friday, in an unusual wave of strikes, the Israeli IDF hit military sites and terror infrastructures belonging to Hezbollah across Lebanon. According to the IDF, amongst the targets that were struck was also terror infrastructure that was containing weapons in the Tzidon area, where Hezbollah reconstruction attempts were recently identified. That site was struck in the past by IDF already. Yet alongside the strikes, And even while the leadership in Lebanon and Syria thwart weapons and drug smugglings at their borders, Lebanon's Nida el-Watan newspaper published an article titled "Hezbollah renews its military infrastructure in the Latakia of Beirut, north of the Litani, and in the Bekaa region." The article claimed that the organization is working vigorously to impose its military and its security infrastructure within its currently available capabilities, including construction of facilities on various smaller bases with stronger fortification and under stricter secrecy. However, it also noted that Hezbollah is actually relocating ammunition storage sites, sometimes in broad daylight, and the local security forces take no action to stop it. Please leave a comment on this video and let me know what you think. And in the meantime, we will continue to report on every development regarding Israel's northern border. So guys, please help us spread the truth by clicking the subscribe button. Now, finally, we're moving to the news from the far south, and that's in Yemen, where Iran continues to smuggle weapons to the Houthi terrorist organizations both by sea and by land, despite prolonged American efforts to curb them. So according to American intelligence estimates, the Houthis can, through Iranian smuggling, rebuild their military capabilities and again pose a threat to the freedom of navigation in the Bab el-Mandab and the Red Sea. One official said that a national strategy on this issue is needed, but Americans' capabilities are needed more elsewhere. As recalled, last March, the United States launched an air operation against the Houthis terrorist organization in which more than 800 targets were struck and over 650 Houthi terrorists were eliminated. Yet about 2 months after it began, President Trump unexpectedly announced its end, claiming that the Houthis had declared their surrender. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development, and as always, we ask you to keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. And if you've made it this far, consider leaving a donation and support our work and help us create more videos like this one. Visit tbnisrael.com/give. Every dollar you give will be invested in creating more videos like this one. We do this in order for you to have all the information that you need about Israel, about the Middle East, so that you will know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. This is a spiritual war, and we need boots on the ground to fight it, yes, but we also need prayer warriors like you guys. So when you pray, make it personal. Find an IDF soldier and pray for him and for his family. Pray for his little kids that are missing their father a few months at a time. Pray for all the civilian lives that are harmed by these terrorist groups all across this region. And make sure to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And together, we will win this war because God is on our side.